Picture this: the sharp click of designer heels echoing through marble corridors. A silhouette that commands attention from every angle. The kind of presence that doesn't just enter a room, it transforms it. Her name was Catherine. Catherine wasn't just my colleague, she was my boss. Every morning, her heels clicked across the marble floor, and the whole office would straighten up. Her curves, her shape, the confidence in every step. I shouldn't have been looking, but I couldn't stop myself. She wasn't only powerful, she was irresistible. And she wasn't just my boss, she was temptation itself. Every morning at 8:47 a.m., those heels would announce her arrival. The elevator doors would part like curtains on a stage, revealing a woman who seemed to have been sculpted by confidence itself. Her blazer, perfectly tailored. Her stride, purposeful yet graceful. Her voice, when she spoke, carried the weight of authority wrapped in velvet. I am Nathan, junior marketing analyst. Invisible in meetings, forgettable in hallways, the kind of employee who blended into beige cubicle walls. But when Catherine walked by, I felt anything but invisible. I told myself it was professional admiration, respect for her success, her leadership, her undeniable presence in our corporate world. But deep down, I knew the truth was far more complicated. And that temptation, that secret fascination I carried for months in silence, I knew it was pulling me towards something more. This is the story of my boss and my secret admiration. A story of forbidden thoughts, hidden desires, and the woman who unknowingly unlocked something within me that I never knew existed. Stay with me, because what happened next will surprise you. Let me paint you a picture of who I was before Catherine changed everything. Nathan Rivers, 26 years old, marketing degree from a decent university. 2 years into my first real corporate job at Henderson & Associates, a mid-sized consulting firm downtown. I was the guy who arrived early, stayed late, and somehow still felt invisible. My cubicle sat in what we called the bullpen, rows of identical workstations where junior employees like me churned out reports, analyzed data, and dreamed of corner offices we'd probably never see. Then there was Catherine Martinez, Senior Vice President of Strategic Development. 34 years old, she carried herself with the wisdom of someone much older and the energy of someone much younger. Her corner office overlooked the city skyline, with floor-to-ceiling windows that seemed to frame her like a portrait. The first time I saw her, I understood why rooms fell silent when she entered. She wore power like other women wore perfume, subtly but unmistakably present. Her dark hair, always perfectly styled, whether pulled back in a sleek bun or flowing over her shoulders like silk. Her suits, impeccably cut, accentuating every curve while maintaining absolute professionalism. But it wasn't just her appearance. It was the way she commanded space. In meetings, while others fumbled with presentations, Catherine would lean back in her chair, fingers steepled, dark eyes assessing every detail. When she spoke, her voice cut through the corporate jargon like a blade through paper. Clear, decisive, magnetic. I found myself watching her. Not obviously. I wasn't some creepy office stalker, but I'd noticed things. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was thinking. How her lips curved into the slightest smile when someone impressed her. The confidence in her stride as she moved through our office, like she owned not just her position, but the very air around her. Other employees either feared her or admired her from a professional distance. She had high standards, she didn't tolerate mediocrity. But she was fair, brilliant, and impossibly elegant. Me? I was caught somewhere between intimidation and fascination. I told myself it was just admiration. Professional respect for someone who had achieved everything I hoped to achieve someday. But that wasn't the truth, and pretending otherwise was becoming harder every single day. Have you ever had someone occupy your thoughts without permission? Someone whose presence becomes a constant hum in the background of your mind? That's what Catherine became for me. It started innocently enough. I'd find myself timing my coffee breaks to coincide with her meetings, just to catch a glimpse of her walking past. I'd volunteer for projects that might put me in the same conference room, even if it meant staying late or working weekends. I began to notice everything. The way her blouse moved when she reached for files on high shelves, the fabric catching light from the office windows, how her pencil skirts hugged her curves as she stood at whiteboards, explaining complex strategies with the kind of passion that made numbers and charts seem like poetry. The sound of her laughter during phone calls, rare but musical when it happened. The subtle scent of her perfume that lingered in elevators long after she'd stepped out, something floral but sophisticated. Confident. During team meetings while others focused on profit margins and quarterly projections, I found myself studying the graceful way she crossed her legs, the elegant arch of her neck when she tilted her head to listen, The power in her gestures as she outlined strategies that could make or break entire campaigns. She was beauty and brains wrapped in executive authority. And I was falling deeper into admiration every day. But here's the thing about forbidden fascination. It doesn't stay neat and compartmentalized. It bleeds into everything. I'd find myself daydreaming during presentations, imagining what it would be like to have her confidence, her poise, her undeniable presence. At night, lying in my small apartment, I'd replay moments from the day, the way she'd smiled when I finally spoke up in a meeting, how her eyes had lingered on mine for just a second longer than necessary when she complimented my analysis. Have you ever admired someone in silence, knowing you couldn't tell them? Knowing that crossing that line would change everything, and not necessarily for the better? That's where I lived for months. In the space between wanting and knowing I couldn't have, between admiration and something deeper, more complex. Because what I was feeling wasn't just attraction. It wasn't just the typical office crush that fades with time and distance. No, this was recognition. Like looking at Catherine and seeing not just what I wanted, but somehow what I could become. And that recognition was about to lead me down a path I never could have imagined. A path that would start with one impulsive moment, one decision that would change everything. Was it wrong to see her this way? She was my boss, my superior, someone completely out of my league in every possible sense. But she was also the woman I secretly admired. And that admiration was about to become something much more dangerous. It was a Thursday evening in October. The office had that hollow feeling that comes after everyone normal has gone home to their families, their lives, their world outside fluorescent lights and corporate deadlines. I should have left hours ago, but I'd volunteered to finish a report that wasn't due until Monday, because staying late meant possibly seeing Catherine working in her corner office, the warm glow of her desk lamp creating a halo around her silhouette. The cleaning crew had already made their rounds. Security was minimal, just me, my computer screen, and the distant sound of Catherine's keyboard clicking away behind her closed door. Around 9 p.m. I heard her heels on the marble floor, heading toward the elevator. She was leaving, finally calling it a night. I waited 15 minutes, then 20, making sure she was really gone. I don't know what possessed me to get up from my desk. Curiosity, maybe, or something deeper, something I'd been suppressing for months. Her office door was unlocked. I shouldn't have opened that door. Every rational part of my brain screamed against it. This was her private space, her sanctuary. Crossing that threshold was a violation of trust, of professional boundaries, of basic human decency. But curiosity won. The door opened silently on well-oiled hinges. Her office was exactly what I'd imagined. Clean lines, expensive furniture, awards and certificates arranged with military precision. The scent of her perfume still lingered in the air, mixed with the leather of her chair and the faint aroma of the coffee she'd been drinking. But what stopped me in my tracks wasn't the mahogany desk or the city view. It was what hung behind her door. A navy blazer, perfectly tailored, hanging on a wooden hanger. Below it, a cream silk blouse, so delicate it seemed to shimmer in the dim light from the hallway. She must have changed before an evening meeting, switching from one power outfit to another. I stood there, staring at those clothes, and something shifted inside me. Not just desire, though that was certainly there. Not just admiration, though that had been building for months. This was recognition, like seeing a reflection of something I'd never acknowledged about myself. What would it feel like to wear such confidence? To move through the world with that kind of presence? To command attention not through volume or aggression, but through sheer, undeniable elegance? What would it feel like to stand in her shoes? That single thought was the beginning of everything. I reached out, my fingers barely grazing the silk of her blouse. It was softer than I'd imagined. Warmer, as if it still held some essence of the woman who'd worn it. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure security would hear it through the walls. What was I doing? What was I thinking? But I couldn't stop myself from wondering, if I put this on, would I feel even a fraction of what she felt? Would I understand the source of her power, her confidence, her magnetic presence? I stepped back, my hand trembling slightly. This was madness. This was crossing a line I could never uncross. But as I stood there in her office, surrounded by the trappings of her success, her femininity, her undeniable power, I realized that line had already been crossed. Not by touching her blouse, not by entering her office. That line had been crossed the moment I'd started seeing Catherine, not just as my boss, but as a reflection of something hidden deep inside myself. That single moment of recognition, standing in her private space, Imagining what it would be like to inhabit her confidence, her grace, her feminine power, changed everything. I left her office exactly as I'd found it, closed the door, returned to my desk. But I couldn't return to who I'd been before, because now I knew what I wanted to explore, and it terrified me. That night, I barely slept. I lay in my narrow bed, staring at the ceiling of my studio apartment, replaying every second of those few minutes in Catherine's office. The silk blouse, the tailored blazer, the way they'd hung there like possibilities waiting to be explored. By Saturday morning, I'd made a decision that should have felt crazy but instead felt inevitable. I drove to a shopping center across town, somewhere I'd never run into coworkers or anyone from my usual life. My heart pounded as I parked, as I walked through the entrance, as I found myself standing outside a women's clothing store. The sales associate was kind, professional, and thankfully didn't ask questions when I mumbled something about shopping for my girlfriend who was about my size, a navy blazer, a cream silk blouse, a pencil skirt in charcoal gray. Items that echoed Catherine's style but weren't exact copies. I wasn't trying to become her, I was trying to understand what she represented. Back in my apartment, I laid the clothes on my bed like artifacts from an undiscovered civilization. For an hour, I just stared at them. Then, with trembling hands, I began to change. The blouse felt like cool water against my skin. Soft. Luxurious. Foreign yet somehow familiar. I fumbled with the buttons, my fingers clumsy with nerves and anticipation. The skirt required more courage. It hugged my hips in a way that made me acutely aware of my body, of lines and curves I'd never paid attention to before. The zipper caught once, twice, then slid home with a whisper. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, and for the first time in my life, I didn't recognize the person looking back at me. This wasn't Nathan, the invisible marketing analyst. This wasn't even someone pretending to be Catherine. This was someone new. Someone who existed in the space between who I'd always been and who I might become. Over the following weeks, my evenings became a secret laboratory of self-discovery. I bought makeup, foundation, lipstick, mascara, learning through YouTube videos and trial and error how to enhance features I'd never considered enhancing before. I practiced walking in heels, starting with low ones, gradually building confidence and grace. The sound they made on my apartment's hardwood floor was music I'd never known I wanted to hear. I experimented with hair, wigs at first, then techniques for styling my own hair in more feminine ways. Each transformation in the mirror revealed another facet of this hidden self. But it wasn't just about the clothes or the makeup or the external changes. It was about the feeling. When I wore Catherine's style of clothing, when I moved with intention and grace, when I caught sight of myself in mirrors, I felt powerful, confident, beautiful in a way I'd never experienced before. Standing in my small apartment, wearing a blazer and skirt, heels clicking on the floor, I finally understood what I'd been seeing in Catherine all those months. It wasn't just attraction, it wasn't just admiration, it was recognition. She had been showing me something I'd never known existed within myself. A femininity that had been buried under years of societal expectations, professional conformity, and the assumption that I knew who I was supposed to be. Have you ever discovered a part of yourself you didn't know existed? Have you ever looked in a mirror and seen not just who you are, but who you could become? The more I practiced, walking, talking in a softer voice, carrying myself with the kind of grace I'd only seen in Catherine, the more I realized something profound. This wasn't just about her anymore. This wasn't just about wanting what she had, or admiring her from afar. This was about me, about a part of myself that had been waiting, dormant, for someone like Catherine to show me it was possible. Her confidence, her femininity, her power, they had been a mirror, reflecting something I'd never had the courage to explore. And now that I'd begun this journey, there was no going back. Every day at the office became a strange double life. Professional Nathan during business hours, and this emerging, feminine version of myself in the privacy of my apartment. But the two worlds were beginning to blur, because the more I practiced being her, the more I realized I was actually practicing being me. Monday morning. The elevator doors opened, and there she was. Catherine, as radiant and commanding as ever, wearing a burgundy blazer I'd never seen before, her hair swept up in an elegant chignon. But something had changed. Not her. She was exactly the same. The change was in how I saw her. Standing there in that elevator, watching her check her phone with the same graceful efficiency she brought to everything, I felt a connection I'd never experienced before. Not the desperate admiration of someone wanting what they couldn't have. Not the surface attraction that had originally drawn my attention. This was deeper, more complex. I was seeing Catherine through new eyes. The eyes of someone who now understood, at least partially, the feeling of inhabiting feminine power, of moving through the world with grace and intention, of finding strength in softness and authority in elegance. During our weekly team meeting, as she presented the quarterly strategy review, I found myself studying her differently, not just admiring her confidence, but recognizing the work that went into it. The way she'd chosen her outfit to project authority while maintaining femininity, how her makeup enhanced her natural features without overwhelming them, the careful modulation of her voice to command attention without seeming aggressive. She made it look effortless, but I was beginning to understand that this kind of presence was an art form, a skill, a choice she made every single day. After work, back in my apartment, as I practiced my own version of that same presence, I felt connected to her in a way that had nothing to do with the crush I'd harbored for months. It was like we were part of the same secret society. Women who understood that true power came not from domination, but from confidence. From knowing exactly who you were and refusing to apologize for it. Except, of course, Catherine didn't know I existed in this capacity. To her, I was still Nathan, the quiet analyst, who rarely spoke up in meetings. She had no idea that she'd been my teacher in a subject I'd never known I needed to learn. Has anyone ever inspired you without even knowing it? Have you ever learned from someone who had no idea they were teaching you? Catherine had shown me that femininity wasn't weakness, it was another form of strength. That grace wasn't submission, it was mastery. That beauty wasn't vanity, it was power. And in learning to embody those qualities, even in the privacy of my own apartment, I was becoming someone I'd never imagined I could be. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd started this journey because I was attracted to Catherine, because I admired her professional success and personal magnetism. But somewhere along the way, this had stopped being about her and started being about me. I was discovering parts of myself that had been hidden under years of masculine conditioning, learning that I could be strong and soft, professional and feminine, confident and graceful. Catherine had been the catalyst, but the transformation was entirely my own. And yet, there was a melancholy to this realization, because the person who had inspired this journey, who had unknowingly guided me toward this discovery, would never know what she'd given me. How could I possibly explain to my senior vice president that watching her move through the corporate world had taught me how to move through my own hidden landscape of identity? How could I tell her that her confidence had become my permission to explore who I really was? Alright, I couldn't. And perhaps that was exactly as it should be. Some transformations are meant to happen in silence. Some teachers never know the depth of their influence. But the impact remains real, profound, life-changing. Catherine had given me the greatest gift imaginable, the courage to discover myself, and I was just beginning to understand how to use it. It's been 6 months since that night in Catherine's office. 6 months since I first touched that silk blouse and felt something shift inside me. 6 months of secret transformations, private discoveries, and slowly learning to inhabit a version of myself I'd never known existed. Catherine still doesn't know. How could she? She still sees Nathan, the junior marketing analyst who's become slightly more confident in meetings, who speaks up more often, who carries himself with a subtle dignity that wasn't there before. She doesn't know that Nathan goes home each evening and becomes someone else entirely. Someone graceful and feminine and powerful in ways that traditional masculinity never taught me I could be. She doesn't know that her burgundy blazer inspired me to buy one in emerald green, that watching her apply lipstick in the office mirror taught me how to enhance my own features, that learning to walk in her style of heels gave me a confidence I carry even in dress shoes. Some heroes teach us about ourselves simply by being authentically themselves. I'm not the same person who used to blend into cubicle walls. I carry myself differently now. I speak with more intention. I've learned that grace isn't genetic, it's learned. That elegance isn't exclusive. It's available to anyone willing to practice it. Now at work, I move through the world with some of what I learned from watching her. The way I present ideas in meetings. How I carry myself in professional situations. The confidence I draw from knowing I have depths that others can't see. And at home, in my private world, I continue to explore and grow and become more authentically myself than I ever thought possible. My boss and my secret admiration. So I have to ask you, have you ever had a secret admiration that changed your life? Someone who inspired you to discover parts of yourself you didn't know existed? Maybe it wasn't your boss. Maybe it was a teacher, a friend, a stranger you passed on the street who carried themselves with such confidence that it made you wonder what confidence would feel like in your own life. Share your story in the comments below. Who was the person who unknowingly changed your life? What did they teach you about yourself? Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, Remember that inspiration can come from the most unexpected places, and sometimes, the person you're meant to become is hidden in the person you can't stop admiring.
The Gender Diary exists to light that path with shared stories. Whether you found connection in this narrative, you're on your own journey of gender exploration, or you're here seeking understanding, your subscription fuels our mission. Every subscriber empowers us to keep illuminating these authentic experiences for our community. Kindly drop a comment below. Your voice adds to the tapestry of experiences that makes this space meaningful. Until our next story unfolds.